And what else? So we are going to start soon session number 7 in Kai Nordic, which is design number 1. And I'm the session chair, Antti Salovaara from Aalto University, and we are going to have 3 talks. All the speakers have already tested the equipment, so we technically can start in 4 minutes when we are ready. It's been going really well so far. We have had difficulty with Zoom bombing. In at least track number 3 had a very kind of a heavy attack on that, kind of in the first session that we had today. But I think it's getting better. At least in the previous session in this track, we didn't have any problems. So that was a very nice thing to notice. What I'm going to do is that I ask you not to ask your questions while the presentation is going, because that might jump in the, well, anyway, there's, it's hard to see who is asking first if the whole chat window fills up with lots of questions. It might also make it difficult to coordinate any of the kind of housekeeping things that we might have during the presentations. So only type your name if you have a question, and I will hand over the question to you when the time's ready. Okay, let's start in 2 minutes.
Should I just start sharing my screen, right? That was Paulina, right? Yeah. Okay.
Dag?
Yeah.
I can suggest something. If you could sit so that you don't have a backlight, so that we can actually see your face, it would be lovely.
Yeah, you'll see my face on. I'll move.
I miss you, so I need to see you.
Thank you. I'll move. I just have this super big screen, you know, display in my kitchen, so now I'm in a better place. Okay, good. So do you guys see my screen now? Okay.
Yes, we do. Yeah.
So then when you're ready, I'll press the play button.
I think we are good to start. It's 14 past in my computer, but we don't really need to. We can get 1 more minute for questions if we start already now. So welcome everyone for those who have just joined. This is session number 7 called Design 1 in Kai Nordic, and we have 3 excellent talks just in an hour, kind of during the upcoming hour, where the first one is by Svanaes and Louise Barkhuus, which is about designer's body as resource in design. And I think Doug is ready for giving the talk. So please, Doug, the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll press the button then. Hello, my name is Doug Svanaes. I'm going to present a paper that I've written together with Louise Barkhuus from ITU in Copenhagen. And I'm from NTNU in Trondheim, Norway, and also part-time at ITU. And the title of our paper is The Designer's Body as Resource in Design, Exploring Combinations of Point of View and Tense. The starting point is first-person design or SOMA design, which is a very successful approach to design, leading to a lot of interesting products like the breathing light and the Soma mat from Mobile Life. And one of the approaches we use in first-person design is to train designers and researchers in body awareness. And to the right, we see Richard Schusterman giving a lecture, giving a workshop in Feldenkrais technique. So one of the challenges with the first person perspective is how to integrate that with other perspectives on the body, and how to do that in a user-centered design setting. So as a starting point for our investigation of how to integrate the different perspectives on the body, we identified 3 different ways of perceiving the body, 3 different perspectives. The first person, the second person, and the third person. The first person perspective is the body as me, the body that is me living my life through my body, and also the body that I experience emotions, pain, joy, etc. through. And it's also the body that I can learn to swim, learn to ride a bicycle, etc. So it is the body as me and the body as I experience being me. So that's the I. The second perspective is the you, the interpersonal body, the body as a social phenomenon, the body in interaction with other bodies. And as has been sort of quite evident lately, we have what is called mirror neurons that allow us to empathically experience what other people experience, that we have some kind of a direct access to other people's bodies through kinesthetic empathy. So that's the second person. The third person is the body as object. And this is more the scientific, the medical perspective on the body, and the aesthetic perspective on the body. It's the body that I see in the mirror, and it's the body that appears in my selfies and other people's selfies. So it's the body seen from outside. What is German then is called the Körper, which is different from the first person, which is called the Leib. And in addition to first person, second person, and third person, we also look at tense. So I can be aware of my body in the present, but I also can remember my body in the past, how it felt to be me. And I can imagine myself in the future and imagine how it will feel to be me in the future. Taken together, these two dimensions of point of view and tense give a 9-cell matrix of how to approach different ways of approaching the body. So I'm going to show this in a concrete example to make it sort of more easy to understand. So the first design case is design a master student actually that I worked with, working with a theater group. And the aim was to build mechanical ears for a red elephant character on stage for a child's play. And the aim was to make the actor a cyborg, to make these ears as natural for him as if he actually was born with ears. So when we went through the design process, so the first thing we did in the design process can be characterized as present third person. We designed from the outside in. So we looked at how the costume fitted onto the actor, and we designed gloves and the mechanics of the ears, and we tried them out. So here we see some of the ways we explored and made sure that the mechanics and all the Bluetooth communication and the Arduinos, etc. worked. So this is very much an engineering approach, which is the first cell. In the second cell, we tried it out ourselves. So that's the me present. So we explored how it felt to actually be an actor. How would it feel to use this and to have it on our head and control it with the glove? Next, we took it to the user, to the actor. And so this is just me, but we don't have any picture of the actor actually here. But we explored with the actor how it would feel for the actor to use this on the stage. So this is about imagining the future work, the future use scenario. So next, the actor used it on stage, and we observed the user and tried to learn from what he did and the way he used the mechanical ears on stage. And last, we interviewed him after the performance and had him explore, and that becomes the past and remember for him, remembering what it was like to be this cyborg, and for us then to observe him and try to empathize with him when he remembered from the past. So in addition to the mechanical air project, we also had a project that we analyzed with this framework that was an audio drama, location-based audio drama, where we also used the framework for analyzing the different stages and the different phases of the project. So what we learned, what did we learn from all of this? What we learned was that the matrix helped us reflect on our design practice. So it made us aware of how we used our body in the first person mode, in the second person mode, in the third person mode, in our design practice, but also how the user was then reflecting in first person and second person and third person. And what we observed was that as designers, we used our bodies a lot in the design process, even when it was not really planned for. What we found was also that we really lacked training in kinesthetic observation or kinesthetic empathy, in observing users and in using our bodies in this process. So one of the conclusions that come out of this framework and the way we have used this framework in the analysis of these two cases is that it has made us aware that some aesthetic training, which is very much about becoming aware of your own body and how you react and how you experience interacting with digital technology, should be supplemented with training in kinesthetic empathy, training in how to empathically observe your users in different phases of the project. And that's it. Thank you.
We can have a virtual applause, and we can actually see lots of people clapping their hands, both virtually and in their own rooms. Thank you very much. It's time for questions. Kia has a question.
Yes, so I haven't read your paper yet, Dag. I think you should unshare your screen.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was just the end of the video.
If I can interfere with the orchestrated experience here. Anyway, I haven't read your paper yet, so I don't know whether you discussed this in your paper, but another big thing that you could compare the Soma design approach with designerly thinking is also in terms of not opening the design space repeatedly. So I don't know, did you consider that? Because that is one, you sort of hone one particular experience and then you spend ages building it, right? Rather than opening the design space and generating tons of ideas and this quick, fast, post-it note based kind of brainstorming. So did you write about that in your paper or?
Not really. I mean, this is more about the triangle sort of, or the diamond sort of, where you are in the diamond of the design thinking, the double diamond model.
Yes, exactly.
So we didn't relate it explicitly back to that, no.
So what do you say about your designing of the ears? Was it a?
It was to a large extent. I mean, a lot of it was given by the play, by the actor and what he wanted and what the director wanted. So it wasn't that much of a sort of a design space in the first place, but it was a lot of design decisions to be made concerning how to get the right feel and how big it should be. He should fit, etc. But in this case, a lot was actually given, which is different from a lot of other projects. So, but yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Antti, or?
Of course.
I think we have enough time. We have two questions queued up, but we have 9 minutes to go, so please.
So I'm one of the few who have tried both your floppy ears and I've also tried the tail. And to me, the tail made a lot of sense. There was a feedback loop in the tail that made it possible for me to feel when I was doing movements, how the tail was responding to that. With the ears, this was not the case. I don't see them and I don't really feel connected to how they're moving. And the way I move them in the version I tried, I had to use my hand. And the connection between the movement of the hand and the movement of the ears was a bit, disconnected. So how do you see that,
Yeah, and when we interviewed the actor afterwards, he had been doing, I think, 10 or 12 performances. And after a couple of performances, he really learned to sort of control them. And for him, it's much more about expression than impression. So it's about his dialogue, a way for him to be in dialogue with the audience. And in sort of, after 3 or 4 of the performances, he really learned to sort of play with it in the dialogue with the kids. So it became very much sort of a cyborg thing for him. But I think it took quite a lot of training for him to actually, for him to make it a natural extension of his body, to put it like that. So
room for redesigning, maybe.
Yeah, sure, but some things actually take time to learn. I mean, it takes time to learn how to ride a bike or drive a car. I mean, it's not, some things are simply just hard to learn, but when you learn them, learn to use it, it gives some benefits. But definitely the potential for improvement.
Thank you, Doug. We need to move to the next question. Sarah.
I have a question about kinesthetic empathy, because this isn't a phrase I've heard before, and I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about that, because from your presentation, it sounded as if that was going to be one of your contributions.
It was more sort of pointing towards, in a way, than the contribution in itself. So it's more sort of that with this learning to. So you ask what it is, sort of. What it is to train how I'm able to sort of understand that interpret your smile, interpret your the way you move your body without doing it in an analytical way, because we have this inborn ability to create some kind of a link or some kind of a connection to other people, and when we do that, we don't need to go through the analytical brain. We just use our intuition and the mirror neurons. But that is something that also can be trained, I think, I hope. I mean, that's what therapists do, and that's what actors do, and that's what a lot of people do. So it's something about training.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, if you come from a kind of phenomenological perspective, then the idea of training empathy is slightly kind of tautological, isn't it? Because from the phenomenological perspective, like it's all as perceived. And could you really get to a point where you'd say, like, now I've got what you mean when you do that movement? There's some truth in that movement, which I can understand through doing it. I just want you to talk about that a bit more.
No, of course not. I mean, of course not. I mean, you can get close, and of course you need a dialogue, as with an interview, etc. You need a dialogue to get deeper into. So of course there's no way to really sort of be fully sort of empathic. I mean, but that's more of an ideal. But it's it's more to train it as a skill to be better at it than we. And it's something that I don't know. I mean, something that in a lot of cultures is simply de-skilled. I mean, we learn not to. I mean, that's what we learn when boys become men. We learn not to empathize.
Thank you.
Okay, and Charlotte, you had a question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, good. Yeah, because I also have a mute button on my headset. So I was sort of curious, I think it's a little bit what Kia was asking, how much you felt this framework helped you in coming up with ideas for the interaction. Because I also looked at the ears and I was thinking, why doesn't they, control your ears with your ear muscles so that you wave your ears and then you would wave the big ears and it would be really cool. So I was sort of, how much do you feel the framework helped you with coming up with new ideas on the interaction?
So the framework came after the design project.
Aha, okay.
It was a way of summarizing a lot of projects that we have been doing and try to come up with a framework for analyzing and from learning from these projects. So it's more of a learning experience, but hopefully in future projects, we can use the framework for planning, or also try to fill all the cells. Do we make use of all these sort of possible ways of using the body? So, and what kind of training should we have? Who should be trained in this and who should be trained in that? So it was more a sort of as a tool for reflection and planning, for reflection in this case, and hopefully for planning in the future. So I write it in the paper, but I should have said it in the presentation. Yeah.
Actually, a very quick question: the papers, we find them because I just joined and I had lots of stuff to do, so I haven't really checked all the links. The papers can you find them easily on the webpage, or where are they?
Are they uploaded to Digital Library now, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
You can find it there. And there's a link from the program page of this conference that takes you directly to the digital library where you can download it.
Okay, so sorry.
That's one of the quickest ways, probably. There's room for one very short question, more like a yes/no type of a question, if anyone has a question to ask. Ahmed has a question. If it's a yes/no question, you can ask.
Yes, no, just following up actually the very nice discussion between Kia, Charlotte, and Berg. I would like to ask, do you see this kind of approach, so involving the body in understanding possible designs for our body, as a contrasting view to plug and play kind of habits that we have with existing devices? For example, I don't know, smartphone. A smartphone is a smartphone everywhere, and we use our fingers, and icons should resemble certain things, like bin is a trash bin, and to delete files, etc. But here, I think there's a potential of involving each of the bodily skills that each of us has, and how we can develop certain skills according to our bodies. So I was just wondering how this kind of exploration enables us to create heterogeneous products, so to speak, instead of just like smartphones or tablets and stuff.
Second answer, please.
Yeah, okay, it's an interesting question because it's also about designing for bodies that are very different from your own body, which is really a challenge. And this is where this sort of becomes important to have empathy, because with this actor, it was fairly easy because his body was very similar to my body. And I also have some experience from stage. So I understood it very easily. But if you're designing for somebody with a totally different body or with totally different sort of gender, age, culture, etc., then it becomes much more important to have this second person perspective in addition to the first person and third person. So I'm not arguing for sort of just one of them. I'm arguing for having these as the different tools we have or perspectives that we use in combination.
Thank you. We have to interrupt here. It's lovely conversation, but we have to also be mindful about our use of time, especially because after this session we have after work, kind of after conference, some kind of a session, and we don't want to lose that. So I will introduce the next speaker, who is Paulina Rajkowska. There's a lot of other authors there on the paper as well. Let's have a final applause to Svanaes, and we are ready to start with Paulina's presentation. Paulina, floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my video. This is my first Kai. I'm super excited, super stressed, just so everybody knows. Is the volume on my mic now okay, or should I lower it more? Good. Then let's do the sharing. Hello, everyone. My name is Paulina, and I'm a PhD candidate at Uppsala University, Sweden. And today I'm presenting a paper on sensitizing scenarios, sensitizing designer teams to theory. You can see the names of all the authors on the slide, as well as the visuals from one of our early tests that really shaped up the direction of this project. But before we get to the specifics of the scenarios, let's talk a little bit about theory first. What is theory? This is a question that in academia and in HCI specifically as well has been given a lot of consideration over the years. What is the relationship between theory and practice? How can we use one to strengthen the other? And there are no easy answers. There's everything from high abstract theory to intermediate level concepts to strong concepts, bridging concepts. We have a lot of vocabulary available in this domain. So first, to narrow down what this commonly used word means for us. We use the concept of social scientific theory as discussed by Bloomer. He points out that that kind of theory is very often in a high level of abstraction. And it can also it's also of a qualitative character, so it can be difficult to translate it specifically into some sort of design guidelines or to apply it in a practical project. But that said, combining it with sensitizing concepts, which were also coined by Bloomer as a term, we have this notion that grand theory or high theory is still a valuable source of vocabulary and also of values and priorities in projects. It helps us broaden our horizons. So it can sensitize us to problems, to conflict, and it sort of just helps everybody to get on the same page. We decided to communicate that through role-playing, which has a very rich tradition, especially in the Nordic area. And the advantage of role-playing is that it relies on the participants empathizing with the roles they're assigned. So you really learn through doing, through interacting with others. So it's not just reading about theories, it's more about acting them out and seeing what can come out. And then all of this was part of a research through design process within the GIFT project, which is an initiative that just ended this winter that was about hybrid installations in museum context. So you will see that our scenarios address specifically the needs of museum and developers. So how did we even get to a proper scenario? First, we had to establish what would be a suitable format. In role-playing, you can do anything from a week-long medieval immersion to short 30-minute scenarios. And the opportunities are endless, so we really had to pore through it. And we were very inspired by the collection of scenarios, #feminism. So after that, we decided to test it with some of our consortium members and museum partners. And what we found out is that it's really important that the scenarios stay close to museum relevance and that they clearly and very explicitly almost connect to the theory. They have to be grounded in theory. So after that, we went back, we did some reworks, and then focused on point 3, contextual authenticity. This is something that was remarked on very early on, and that's also one of the feedbacks that came from the picture that I showed you on the first slide, that this has to feel like it is about our work practice, like it is something relatable for us, that the participants really have to feel like this isn't just a made up plaything. This represents something deeper, and it could be a real work situation. So right now we have 4 scenarios. The paper focuses on 2 of them that have been most tested. And as you can see, the structure for the scenarios, each of them is connected to a theoretical concept. So for example, the gift refers to gifting practices as considered in anthropology by Malinowski, for example. And it has a set of roles. It has instructions on how to time it, what to do, what kind of attitude your role should possess. There's some of the instructions in the paper, but you can also go online to find the scenarios and look through the actual procedure of running one yourself if you're interested. But then once we had that, once we developed the actual scenarios in the format, feeling that they're as contextually relevant as possible, we did a proper full-scale testing with the museum and developer partners. One of the testing venues was the Jönköping Region Museum in Sweden, and then the second one is Museum of Yugoslavia in Serbia. So those are two of the partners that we've worked with. We held workshops where the scenarios were part of what was intended also to eventually turn into ideating and possibly figuring out the next stage of prototyping for the projects that were already ongoing. And this is one of the responses we got from the curators after interviewing them afterwards of what they thought of this experience. And this is, again, reflecting the focus on the contextual relevance and accuracy. They felt that this is a discussion that you would normally have, but perhaps you wouldn't make the same arguments you do. You would be forced to be on the opposite side of the conflict and to sympathize with those that you normally disagree. And it would really push you out of your comfort zone, which they thought was very interesting. Some of them even refer to it almost as a form of therapy, where you can talk out certain things that normally you would not be able to do because of social context. So what are our findings from running the scenarios? So first of all, people did learn about the theories that we used, even if it was not a direct way of learning according to this theory and then sort of spitting out definitions and examples. It's more of an awareness of what does this theory put at the forefront, what is the problem, what can be addressed. But also a finding that was very important and maybe a bit unexpected was how much this can contribute to meaningful group cohesion. So it turned out that just doing this exercise that is perhaps a bit uncomfortable, it takes some suspension of disbelief, it tries to challenge you to be playful and to sort of connect to that layer of you. It served as a shared experience for the team to open them up for more transparent discussions and sort of expressing their opinions, and it led to the museums voicing some interesting things. But again, authenticity as a key factor. This is really important. If we want to teach people through role-playing something, and if we want to sensitize them to the theories that we think might be relevant for them, this has to be done as close to their experience as possible. But in the process of designing those scenarios, we've also created some principles for how to design scenarios in the future. So using characters as alibi, that was one of the points that I mentioned in terms of pushing people outside of the box. You have the comfort of arguing for positions that perhaps aren't your own. You can say that this was the character, this isn't your own stance, which gives you a certain amount of freedom that perhaps normally you would not have in meetings in this context. Relevance to the participants, this is something that reoccurs over and over and over again. People really have to feel like this is somehow close to their experience and they can learn from it and it's appropriate at the given time. It can be tough to pitch those scenarios to encourage people to do them, but this really strengthens the willingness of others to do it, and it really helps how much they commit to it and how much learning you can get done. Importance of a debrief, going back to the theory, it is really important to make those connections very visible through discussion after the scenario. It is important to not just experience this together, but to talk it out, to find out what have we learned together in a team, and to sort of establish what's what. That usually also leads to heightened energy, which was very beneficial for the follow-up design process. And in itself, is something to consider as both resource, but also something that needs to be caused by the scenario. And then, of course, when to use scenarios and when not to. They're not a cure-it-all. They can help a lot in the beginning of a project to bring everybody on the same page, to have the same vocabulary, and to establish what direction are we going towards. They can be used later in the process as well, when we're sort of trying to follow up on things that have been done but need to be redone. But the sensitizing scenarios are most useful for mixed audiences, so I mean interdisciplinary projects, and for those who can really merit from them. There's no point pushing this on unwilling audiences, because unless we do manage to make it relevant and useful and debriefed for them, this is not going to work. That said, you can try the scenarios yourself. They're available at the website gifting.digital, the instructions on how to run them, and so on and so forth. And thank you. That's all for me. And once again, you can look at one of our early storytelling experiments that ended up in our team creating a museum exhibit called Brighton Bunny Burglary. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Excellent. We have already one question waiting to be asked. So, Karin, would you like to start with your question?
Yes. Thank you, Paulina. Nice to see you. I mean, we are in the same project in a sense, but I haven't been part of this. So I'm just curious, because I know you tested this on a mixed group. So there was like museum people and designers. So I'm just curious now, was there a difference in response between the designers and the museum people?
So this is definitely something that we need to explore further. Can you? Volume?
Okay,
yeah.
Good, thanks.
Okay, so this is definitely one of the things that we need to explore further, because we do see a difference in response. But that difference also varies with the scenarios. So some scenarios are more about theories that museums are generally more familiar with. So for example, the concept of new museology wasn't anything surprising for the museum curators, while at the same time for designers, the perception of it was quite different. And then it's the other thing, when we do scenarios about playfulness, it's not that weird to sort of game designers that we're using this aspect, but then to museums it's sort of like, but where did this come from, and why is this happening? But the most important part I would say here is that it did bring all of the participants on the same page and gave them the same sort of basis for further discussion. So whether they had prior opinions on the theories or on the topics, now they sort of developed a shared understanding for doing, and it was really valuable. So there is definitely something in the different audiences and the different scenarios even, but we still don't fully know how it's gonna develop. So if any of you want to use the scenarios, just please let us know so we can follow up as well and get all that data and collaborate, because we think we will work with this further.
Okay, thank you. Did that answer to your question, Karin? Very good. Okay. No one has queued for questions so far. Please keep on thinking. I have a question though, which is that it strikes me that it might sound a bit like preposterous to think that you are trying to educate designers about social theories. So it's a kind of creates a kind of a hierarchy of who knows and who doesn't know. At least it seems to like prioritize the knowledge of social scientists over the designers. Have you considered that, and what kinds of suggestions would you have to avoid the feeling that designers might be feeling a bit intimidated by this approach?
So I would say that in a sense it can be intimidating, and I would say that calling this social scientific theory is sort of the terminology from Bloomer, because I would say that it can be different kinds of theories in different scenarios, and this specific focus also came from our theoretical approach in the GIFT project itself. So it doesn't mean that sort of different kind of theories that come more specifically from HCI or even from harder sciences cannot be employed in that sense. But as I said, it is a bit of a struggle to actually
pitch this to people, and also what you said about the designers. It's actually really fascinating because in my experience during the tests, the designers would sort of have this response, but this isn't theory, this is obvious. This is part of our practice, this is the thing we do. Why are you calling this theory? And to me, this shows how, yes, of course, this is theory now. It used to be practice. We extrapolated it. It goes both ways. So sort of, I think part of this exercise is to try to make people less scared of theory.
Okay, thanks. And Kia, you had a question.
Yeah, so I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on the felt experience of theory. I've always found role-playing extremely hard to do. And so entering into a theory and really feeling it, and going back to Dog's presentation about the lived experience of something. So how would you say that worked out? And are there things that you could tell us about how to make that happen?
So there is definitely the part that I mentioned with the audience has to be willing. So we made a big point of this should not be pushed on people. We've actually, during our workshop, given some of the freedom to the participants to choose which scenario they want to play. And the thing is that there is this argument we are really trying to figure out is to what extent theory is something separate that we apply, and to what extent it is just part of us. So as in the paper we write that social scientific theory specifically is very confusing or complicated in that sense that we are all humans, we all have experience of being humans. So sort of talking to people about gifting as a theory seems very weird since this is something we all do. So I think that maybe this isn't even about making people feel something new. It's about recontextualizing what they already have access to by putting this new framing on it, if that answers your question. You can just keep asking.
I can ask a follow-up question. It's like, you know, if so of course there are certain things that are sort of deeply human, and it's not so hard to enact them, but the whole point is perhaps also to get access to those experiences that are not everyday experiences or culturally inaccessible to me, or to my body, to myself, gender, blah blah blah, all of these things, you know, as like the felt experience of doing something and going deeply into that. I just find to make theory lived in that sense to be a very evocative and problematic idea. I don't know. So that was where my question was.
So to respond to that, I think we are not making an argument that role-playing can help you on a personal level relate to the theory in that sort of embodied way that includes your gender and everything. Of course, the scenarios are simplifications of certain phenomena, and if you will look at some of them, they push for things that are common experiences, for example, in museums, that are things that we assume on average most people have been to a museum once and they have a point of relation to it. So we are not pushing this to explore things that might be very difficult to imagine. It's more relying on the expertise that people already have, and also specifically working with both designers who develop for museums and museum curators. Those are people that can very much relate to it, and that's again coming back to that contextual relevance. That connection, we cannot sort of put it in their heads. They need to have it from the start in some regard, but we can recontextualize it, make it more critical, and bring them closer together and make the group more cohesive.
Thank you. We have to move on. Thanks again for very nice questions, very good answers too. Let's have an applause to Paulina and the author team. And we have our third speaker. Here we have an interesting setup. Sandjar will be talking on video, but Marie-Louise will be answering the question and launching the video. So Marie, you can start.
Yes, I will launch the video. So thank you all for still being here. I will present Sandjar on your screen. And luckily, we also have a few other co-authors with us in this Zoom room. So that's actually a very, very nice. So let me share my screen.
In design featuring. Hello, my name is Sandjar Kozubaev, and this is Expanding Modes of Reflection in Design Featuring. And I'm presenting on behalf of my wonderful collaborators and co-authors, Chris, Noura, Louise, Nick, Britta, and Richmond. The HCI design research community has engaged a range of approaches to investigate and articulate different and alternative futures. Our aim is to consider the methodological and theoretical challenges that they pose. While the aspirations of these approaches are often critical or reflective, we find that it can be difficult to articulate the claims of such work and appreciate its unique contributions. In this research, we propose a set of reflective modes to address that. In our paper, we use the term design featuring to foreground two important elements. In this work, design is not used to solve an immediate problem, but rather to produce knowledge through debate, contestation, and reflection, and is normally concerned with future alternatives that differ, and often very radically so, from today. In related work, which I'm not going to cover in detail today, we engage with a range of practices and research agendas, including speculative design and design fiction, performance, enactment, and experience, as well as projects and work from disciplines beyond HCI. Our method is rooted in diverse experiences and subjectivities of researchers involved in this work, each of whom had a unique experience in design featuring. At the same time, we're mindful that we came to this project with a certain degree of privilege and bias. For instance, each of us are very well educated. We're all affiliated with Western institutions of higher learnings, and so as we develop this work, we had to be mindful of this fact in our own biases. We started with the project by generating a curated list of texts that influenced our work individually, specifically our design featuring work. And then we used those texts to write short essays reflecting on how those texts influenced our design featuring work and what it means to us. Over the course of several months, we then shared those reflections with each other and derived themes that were distinct or common across those reflections. As a result, we derived 5 reflective modes for design featuring. In each of these modes, we propose how researchers can engage with design featuring differently and be more reflective with our own work. Each of these modes pose a set of questions that researchers and practitioners can use to challenge their own work. In the interest of time, we'll only focus on 2 modes today, temporal representations and engaging with the real world, but we encourage you to read the paper to find out more about the others. First, temporal representations. This mode attends to the material, mental, social representations of the future and how they shape design featuring. We draw on research from STS and anthropology, and we argue that specific temporal representations influence specific framings of the future and the researchers as well as participants' subject positions towards it. Our first example is the future's cone, of which there are very, very many variations, as you can see from a recent Google image search, but they're quite consistent across each other. It looks like a cone radiating from the left to the right, and it reduces a certain nuance into the different kinds of futures that are possible, plausible, probable, and preferable. But at the same time, it has a certain Western English-speaking bias with the fact that it progresses from left to right, the fact that it also starts with a common point and assumes that there's a certain shared present, and sort of obscures complexities of historical context as well as the diversity of situatedness of different presents. This representation of the future and its widespread use in design futuring illustrates how cultural and linguistic conventions can embed themselves even in those discourses that attempt to be critical, pluralistic, or self-reflective. To illustrate this point, we turn to anthropology, specifically the Aymara language, which is the language of the people living in the Andes region. It's spoken by over 1 million people, and it's one of the official languages of Bolivia. One of the interesting facts about how the Aymara language works is that the mapping of the future and the past is different from what you would expect in a Western language. Specifically, the word for back, which is the word for behind, is the same word that refers to the future. And the word for front, which also refers to eye, front, and sight, is the word for past. What's also interesting is that this mapping is not just linguistic, it's also gestural. So when the Aymara speakers refer to the future, they would gesture backward. And when they refer to the past, they'll gesture forward. This example shows how fundamental concepts such as temporal reasoning can get shaped in specific ways to generate cultural variability. And we bring up this example to show that conceptual frameworks of the future are culturally situated, and attending to these dimensions of temporal reasoning in design futuring projects can help contest and reimagine them in productive and creative ways. The next mode is engaging with the real world. This mode encourages researchers engaging in speculative practice and future-oriented design work to consider how their work engages with and ultimately impacts the real world, from conception to outcome. We're not suggesting here that design futuring always requires some sort of a direct participation to be valuable. The goal of this reflective mode is to broaden the scope of what engagement with the real world actually means. So first, we need to consider how we as researchers can better involve people, individuals, and organizations to engage in speculative research. And the challenge here for researchers is to curate such engagements that present deep and compelling futures which remain open to be shaped by others. So we refer to such notions as co-speculation, cultural commentators, and trajectories. And one of the examples that was useful for us is Data Catcher by Gaver et al., which uses this object, a digitally connected object, that allows a participant to engage with urban data in a specific situated way. Second, we need to consider the longer-term impact that speculative artifacts carry after they're produced and distributed, and how they might affect real-world practices and communities. What's notable here that speculations often skirt boundaries of fake and real, and so design futuring, especially when it's aimed at critique, can be all the more compelling for inviting an audience to question reality. For example, here, the project called Period Share by Sundnes et al. Creates this fictionalized service and a company that started off as a Kickstarter funding campaign, but was also presented as a fictitious company at venues like trade shows. Doing such research ethically and responsibly requires considerable care, reflection, and control of the context in which such work is encountered. So what we want to say here that speculative artifacts rarely exist in a vacuum, and so considering how these objects make an impact beyond the actual object itself is very productive. Hopefully these two modes gives you an idea of how you might use it in your own work, but we envisage the proposed reflective modes these modes can serve as productive resources for design futuring researchers in at least 3 ways. You can analyze the work, your own work, past work, or future work. You can articulate the work. You can articulate it for its contributions. You can articulate limitations and design choices, or the impact of the work beyond a single publication. Third, we suggest that the reflective modes can be generative. You can generate new ideas, new questions, introduce new nuance to ongoing projects, and so on. Finally, I wanted to say that we do not intend for these reflective modes to be an exhaustive set or to serve as some sort of a mandatory checklist. Rather, our goal is to contribute these reflective modes in the spirit of open-ended generativity and to help future-oriented HCI approaches continue to grow, strengthen, and deepen their practices and accountabilities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Lots of hands clapping. Marie-Louise, do you want to add anything, or do we go straight to the questions?
No, nothing particular. I just wanted to say hi to my co-authors who's also here. I think Noura and Richmond is here.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Okay. No one has typed their name yet on the chat, but I have a question. So to me, your paper kind of offers a really good kind of a way to reflect and also question one's own approaches and kind of prejudices and so on. But it's very much a kind of an armchair oriented kind of approach where you mostly think, but you don't, for instance, offer here in the kind of the productive resources that you mentioned in the end, a possibility to act on, such as in a designerly practice to design something new or carry out some field trials, empirical studies. So could you think any of those types of kind of activities that would also benefit from these 5 different types of approaches that the paper presents?
Yeah, so we don't suggest like specific techniques or specific methods that people can sort of like directly engage with, but we do have a few, like for instance, in the reflective modes that we present in the paper, we have these reflective questions at the end of each mode that I'll direct the audience to, where we sort of have some quite specific questions that people can ask themselves and reflect upon. I think they are quite generative for design work. We also have a few examples throughout the modes where we point towards different researchers' work that is more generative, I would say. All authors of the paper, we all engaged in different kinds of design practice, and it has been very important for us that it is really generative for design practice, to not just sit in the armchair or what you refer to.
One thing that where I think this could be also very valuable, which I don't know if you mentioned, you didn't mention it in the presentation, but it might be in the paper, is in design education. So for instance, junior designers, students and so on, they might not be aware of some of those kinds of views that they have, although they don't notice that. And now these approaches that you present, they might be a kind of a good things to point to, kind of to point out, so that people can become aware of some kinds of biases that they might be having. So my question is that this kind of your work seems to be offering lots of different new avenues for further work. Is there any kind of a possibility for you to, for instance, to go and develop this further in the education of designers, or maybe in running other research through design projects, for instance, where you could apply these?
I think that's a great comment. We definitely think that there is a lot of this design futuring work happening in HCI these days, and you see a lot of like single case studies that are coming up with cases and ideas for how to do it. And we would definitely, the intention with these reflective modes is to sort of like give some sort of perspective on the field and make people think of these different modes. And I can definitely see if you're developing a design futuring course in an educational settings that you can have specific lectures or seminars relating to each of these modes in order to really go into depth with them. Yeah, Richmond and Noura, please fill in for me as well.
Oh no, I think that's great. Yeah, and I think so. That's a really nice question too. Thank you. Yeah, and I think, you know, it could be all 5 of them, or even just trying out 1 or 2. You know, the different you know, if one of the themes, you know, like designerly form giving is one that I really care about personally. You know, even just looking at one of them and then asking some of the reflective questions of one's own practice. And I hope through the paper, a lot of the designs that we kind of poke at, we're like, well, you know, in this project, the authors of that project could have reflected more on these questions. You know, 90% of the time in the paper, those are actually our projects that we're poking at. So I hope that it'll give some example of how it can be used as part of a kind of ongoing design practice. And also, I just wanted to add, it's largely a synthesis paper. Like a lot of the kind of reflective modes that we're talking about, of course, other people are also talking about them. And we tried to bring in many, many different designers who are already thinking in those areas and just kind of put them in conversation with each other.
Great. Sarah, do you have a question?
I wondered if you had any big arguments in the process of writing this paper, or was there anything in particular that you all disagreed on or that was particularly juicy? No one wants to answer. Not bad.
It's a really good question. So the way we came across in the beginning was really like many of us come from different institutions, and of course we've been following each other's work throughout the years, and it has been really interesting actually to go into a conversation like that where we haven't necessarily been in a research project together, right? So it really created interesting discussions and possibilities to talk over a longer time, like not just in one workshop or something, but really continue discussion. I think we've been talking and discussing a lot on positionality and also material form giving, and discussing how important those points are. And some of us are attending more to some of us are doing more participatory work. I haven't done a lot of that in my initial design fiction work, whereas other people have done more of that. So I think that was one where I became more aware and inspired to do that in future work.
Obviously, this is a difficult question, because if you have been fighting against each other over the years in producing this paper, you might not want to reveal it now. But yeah, any other questions? I'm also asked to give one advertisement, but there's some time for one more question if anyone wants to ask. Okay, then not. Thank you, everyone. Again, very nice session. Also, very much thank you to Marianela, who can you wave your hand so that people can see you? So who has been a tremendous help here in running this session on a technical side. Excellent work. There's this advertisement. Barry just messaged to me that there's this afterwork. Now that kind of the official program of the day is over today, but we have the social program starting in 15 minutes in this Zoom room. So you don't need to leave anywhere. In 15 minutes, we have an afterwork. I have no idea what it is, but Barry has obviously some plans, and don't go anywhere. It's going to be exciting and interesting. If anyone wants to say anything else, now we have a you can open your mics, you can start announcing things, telling something about what's going to come. For the
afterwork, just wanted to say, now quickly go off to your kitchen and get yourself some wine or something, and and then we're trying to get into the typical Kai party mode, and you have to think Hawaii and all the fun we would have had, and then come back here at past, and we'll start the after work at that point in time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Kia.
Thank you, Antti, so much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for a great session. We had over 50 persons here at some point, so that was lovely. Okay, see you soon in this channel.